Hello, football fans, and welcome back to the Corner Flag podcast. We're in the away leg today with our chat with former Matilda and TV personality Catherine Cannuli. If you haven't already, make sure you do check out the warm-up and the home leg, available on YouTube and Spotify. Thanks so much for joining us. I really do hope that you enjoy it. Make sure you pass the cast to your friends and family. That always helps us as well. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy the away leg with Catherine Cannuli. And how did you find out about your first Matildas call up?
It was basically we were in camp in Canberra, and we got a letter. I'm pretty sure it was a letter that got.
For those people at home who don't know what a letter is, it's a little piece of paper. They put in an envelope, comes into your letterbox. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was a letter that got sent out, and then we got told. But a lot of that stuff back then was done on camp, face to face. You know, then you get your official letter that said you're being invited into camp, and then from there, whether you would play or not would be a different story. And
had you been in many camps before that point?
Yeah, I had. Yeah. I had been in a fair few leading into, again, the funding was always a massive issue to whether we would play, internationals, so proper international games. So you don't actually get a cap unless it's a sanctioned international game. And back then the funding didn't allow us to play a lot of them.
Yeah. I suppose, what was that moment like when you realised you were going to play and, get a cap? And did you start the first game?
Oh, God, I
couldn't find
remember.
This out.
I think I came off the bench first game, and then I started the second game.
Okay, so when you get that call, you're on the bench to come on.
Yeah.
What was the first thing through your mind? Like, was it don't mess this up, or was it I'm buzzing? What was it, or a bit of both?
Nah, look, I'm always sort of more the one that's just buzzing just to get on and actually play. I didn't really think about it too much, to be honest. You always sort of get that jelly legs in the change rooms before a game, but once you jump on the pitch and you get that first touch in, I think that's important. I'm more the type of person where just want to get that first touch in. Once I get that first touch in, everything else is just a blur, to be honest. I just love playing football, love being on the pitch and doing what I do.
And what was the crowd like there?
It was actually a decent crowd, I remember, in Central Coast. Again, a lot of family and friends, but the Central Coast had really got behind the games, and there was actually a fair few people in the crowd at that stage.
Yeah. Empty seats still?
There was empty seats still, yeah.
So just in terms, again, that contrast to now, they're selling out. It doesn't matter where the Matildas go.
Yeah.
How does it feel, I suppose, to have seen it go from where it was when you started to where it is now? How does that make you feel? And probably regardless of what you may think of yourself, because I know you're very modest, but you've been a big pioneer in that, whether that is through your playing career, coaching career, your media stuff. Like, this all adds up to build to the hype. So, how do you feel, I suppose, seeing the Matildas now in the position that they're in?
Oh, it's beautiful to see where the game is. And again, we've still got so much growth that we can still expect from the Matildas and football in Australia. And I remember going to watch the Brazil game when they had the first sellout at Penrith. I was in the stands with my nephew, actually, and I think I just started crying because I was like, wow, like you never thought that it was going to be possible, and to actually see that and experience that, in real life, it was like, look how far the game has come. And not only myself, but so many others as well that came before me that, paved the way for what we are today. And so much of that mentality, you always hear about the never say die mentality, and that's come from, all the players in the past that's passed that on, and it's still something that continues to be passed on to the next Matildas that come through. They know what it means to be a Matilda and to be part of that camaraderie. And again, there hasn't been many Matildas that have actually capped. I think there's maybe 215 if it's at that by now. Mm-hmm. But everyone knows what it was like, and you get told about the history and you're part of that.
Yeah. And where to next for the Tillies?
I think there's just so much more. There's so much more. There's so much more growth. We look at the last World Cup that we had on home soil, I think was absolutely huge for women's football. Again, whether it was grassroots, whether it's at NPL level, it's going to be a massive game changer for football in Australia. But the sky's the limits for the Matildas. And if we continue to invest in football in Australia, I think if anybody can win a World Cup, it would be the Matildas. They can. But it's about the investment and looking at where are the next generation of Matildas. How do we continue the growth? How do we get our A-League in a great position where we can continue to produce players to become Matildas? I think that's going to be the first step for them.
Yeah.
And then look from the A-League to then look at overseas opportunities. But their first thing needs to be, how do we produce? How do we develop here in Australia? How do we get them into the A-League? And then where do they go to from there?
Have you read my notes? Because my next question was, how do we get the A-League, like the women's A-League, I suppose, fully professional, where this is a viable career option? Because at the moment, we've got a bunch of girls overseas, which is great. But how do we build that A-League and make it one of those really strong leagues that people want to come here to as well? Because we get a few a few imports that come in, which is great. But how do we, I suppose, what is that next step? Do you think it's purely down to investment?
It's investment. It has to be. If we don't invest in our game in the younger age groups, the A-League is not going to be successful, because at the end of the day, you need a product to sell, and the A-League needs to be a good product for players, not to want to bypass the A-League. You don't want our 18, 19-year-olds to want to leave and go abroad to play their football. You want them to be built and grown in the A-Leagues, where that's their first step. They're playing regular minutes. They become a regular in the A-League. And then from there, our A-League clubs can benefit from, a sign-on fee, whatever it is, where they're selling them onto a club where they actually can recoup some money in that space and put it back into the system or back into the women's space, which I think is something that we need to do better at in our country. But investment, as you know, I'm involved from grassroots all the way to the highest level, and I've seen it across, the last 10 years of me being involved on the other side of not being a player. And we need to continue to invest in, whether it's grassroots, the MPL, the coaches. Again, I think coaches is a massive one. I think it's somewhere that we really lack in Australia. Our investment in our coaches needs to really be looked at, because if we have better coaches, we're going to produce better footballers.
Yeah. And I suppose even on that with the coaching, I know especially in the boys space, 13, 14, 15 years old, we're very competitive with the rest of the world. It sort of seems this next step, and the coaching in that area is something that definitely needs an improvement. So I do agree with you 100% if we can get that investment. And the boom of the World Cup on home soil, and I went to a few games, and it's great to see not just girls, there were boys there in Tilly's jerseys. Like it was great to see all that. But that boom obviously led to a lot more girls signing up to play local football after that. But we need to keep that generation all the way through. So if investment is what it takes, and we can get more competitions and more pathways for those girls, I think that can only be positive for the Matildas. And I'd love to see them win something quite soon, because we've got an Asian Cup under our belt?
Yeah, we've got a couple of Asian Cups.
I'm trying to think what year was the last one. I can't remember off the top of my head, but for this generation to see that group or the next group win something, I think will be massive as well for that growth.
Absolutely, and I think the actual investment into the Matildas really over the last few years, you can see they've just gone to another level, and these girls now are full-time professionals. They live and breathe football. That's all they have to concentrate on. But it's about getting the next generation of our young Matildas. How do we start to bridge that gap as well?
Yeah, and there's so many options in Australia as well, especially with women's sport. Everything's taken off, the AFL, the cricket, whatever. There's a lot of options for girls, so we really need to keep them in football so we can get those best results. So how did you know it was time to retire?
I think I started to ask myself a couple of different questions. I think at that time there was a changeover in coach. So Tom Samani had left and there was a new coach that had been appointed. And I was sort of in that limbo stage of I was going to all the camps and I was there, and it was like, do I stay another cycle and go the whole 4 years, or do I just keep going for the next 12 months and see where I'm at? And I sort of said to myself, if I'm not going to commit to the next 4 years and go the whole cycle and actually commit, then what's the point of just going for another year? So I sort of sat down with my family and went through some, pros and cons. I was in the point where I wanted to start to establish myself outside of football. And again, you look at the financial side of things and you're getting up to go to training, you're going to work all day, you're coming home, you're doing it all over again. It started to become tough and started to take a bit of a toll on my body physically. And I just got to the point where I'm like, well, I've got other goals in life. I'm happy that I've come back. I'm happy that I achieved what I did achieve, and I was content with that. And I just didn't want to go for that next cycle. I had, other goals. I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to do, some traveling or, other things that I had in my mind. And I was actually at peace with my decision that, I'm just going to step away now. I'm happy that I've done what I've done, and that was the decision that I made. And again, it was probably a decision that came probably 12 months too early, because I think it was just after that the girls got the CBA approved, and the conditions of their sort of working conditions got a little bit better. But I never regret the decision of stepping away. I think once you're content with that, I think it's an easy one done.
And what was that next step, I suppose? So you've retired, season's finished, whatever. Did you know exactly what you wanted to do next, or how did you find your feet in that area?
Well, I was working in our family business at the time. I was running that, and that was quite consuming as well. I was doing quite big hours, and the business was thriving at that time, and I was working there and doing some big hours. And I knew that life after football was sort of where I was going to go. I knew that I still wanted to be involved in football. I just didn't know where it was going to take me. So I was sort of volunteering and doing some coaching at Southern Districts Football Association just as a volunteer, going down and doing just some random sessions with the teams there. And within 12 months, I was like, I think I want to work in football full time, and pitched a sort of a role to Southern Districts Football Association. And they're like, okay, well, let's see how it goes. It was a part-time role at the time, and I basically threw everything in terms of the business and went and gambled on making a career out of football. And everybody was sort of like, what are you doing? Like, you're crazy trying to, work in football. It's tough. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're passionate about something and you want to make a difference, and I felt that I could, and it was tough.
Yep.
Trying to work 4 different coaching jobs, trying to make a living, it wasn't easy. And it's probably, different to what I was saying 12 months prior, because I was like, I want to, move away from football because I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to play professionally. But I just love the game so much, and I just felt like that I could give back a lot more, and I had so much more to give, and I just wanted it to continue to be part of my life, and I knew that I wanted to make it happen. And 10 years on, I'm at Southern Districts Football Association and SD Raiders, which I'm a full-time employee. I was the first ever women's technical director ever appointed on a full-time role, which I thought was quite cool as well. So it was a grind in the beginning, but what we've built at Southern Districts over the last 10 years, I think, has been, for me, it's been one of my proudest moments.
Yeah. And again, you've read my next questions ahead of it. So you're technical director for the women's program at Southern Districts. Is that your title, I suppose?
That's the title. So I look after the association, which is obviously grassroots, so all girls, and then I look after the MPL club, which is the SD Raiders Football Club, which is girls junior development league, which is the old SAP league, and youth league and senior women. So there's a clear pathway there, whether you're coming from grassroots all the way through into MPL first grade. And there's a great connection there between our association players that we get in that come through and go through our development programs, and then hopefully one day, whether they become an SD Raider first grade player or they go on to become an A-League player or a Matilda, whatever it is, there's a home for those girls in our area.
Yeah. And what would your average week look like, I suppose, work-wise, like with that role? Is it something that changes every week, or is it a pretty much this is my A to Z?
It changes every week. Every week is different. There's always something different that's on, and we do so many different things. And anyone that knows me knows that I can't sit still, and I'm massive in terms of the growth of what we want to do and what we want to achieve. And I've got some really good people around me that help and support me in that program. But every week is so different, whether it's, we're doing association stuff, whether we're out at schools, whether it's, we're in the peak time of MPL season. We've just started a Catherine Cannuli Cup, which is for primary school kids in our local area as well, which is a free tournament for young girls to come and play football. And every year we just want to add, foundations and build those blocks onto what we're doing and how we're going to grow and get better and better. And again, it's just about giving young girls the opportunity. And again, whether it's they just want to play football for fun, whether they want to take it serious, whether they want to go to the next level, whatever it may be, myself and the association are there for those girls to have an environment where they can be comfortable and be able to thrive in the environment that they are in.
And what do you think, I suppose, the toughest part? That's a beautiful vision, for what you want to do. And what's the toughest part? Not so much as in, not necessarily what's the most exerting for you, but what's something if you could change overnight, you would change overnight?
Probably the main one would be the cost of football these days, how much it actually costs to play in, the youth league space, that MPL space. I think the costs are becoming huge. The cost of living is obviously becoming an issue in Australia as well, especially in Sydney. But I think the cost of football at the moment is getting a really, really tough one, because there's a lot of talented kids out there, but I know that there's obviously a lot of families out there that can't afford for kids to play. So if I could remove the cost from football, I definitely would if it was something that I could, just click my fingers and change. But I also think we need to be able to have more coaches and more qualified coaches that got the experience to be able to give their time and be able to get, really reimbursed for putting that time into to what we do. And again, I can speak for our coaches in our program. It's tough. The amount of hours that you put in to what we want to do and what we want to achieve, the money never comes close to what they actually should be getting.
Yeah.
It's all about the passion and giving back to these young kids.
Yeah. Very, very good answer. I'll say very politician, diplomatic with the cash. I enjoy it. But no, you're right. It is wild, some of the fees that are coming up. And, I remember my first grassroots club, my rego was $5, and I think I got a free pair of shin pads or something. Like that was why we went there,
good.
That was all it was. So it's very, very different now. And just moving along on the coaching space, you did step in at the Wanderers for a bit there as well. Do you have any aspirations to coach at that level again, or were you helping out, doing a favour? What was that sort of situation?
Look, I got a phone call to come and step in as the assistant coach, I remember, for the first year, and they said, look, we're looking for an assistant coach. Are you interested? I was obviously working at Southern Districts at the time. I was looking after the first grade women's team, and I was obviously the technical director at that time. And I said, yeah, no problems. I'll come and be the assistant coach for the season. And I really enjoyed it. It was an awesome space to be in. It was tough. It's a difficult space to be in because you're full professional and you're 24/7, and it's a completely different side as a coach to a player, because as a player, you turn up, you train, you go home. As a coach, you're doing all the planning, all the prepping, making sure that everything is ready to go. And if you want to be successful at what you're doing, it means time and effort and all those extras that you got to put in. And it wasn't easy. It was really difficult trying to juggle, obviously, my Southern Districts role and the Wanderers role. And I'd done that for quite a few years, and I think I'd done my apprenticeship. And at the time, the Wanderers were without a head coach, and Dean Heffernan at the time had stepped away from his head coaching role, and they pulled me into a meeting room and asked me, look, we would love for you to be the next head coach of the Western Sydney Wanderers. And, at that time I was like, am I ready? Am I not? But are you ever ready? And you can never back away from an opportunity like that. And again, I was so humbled to be asked to take on that role, and it's something that does mean a lot to me, because as everyone knows, I'm very passionate about the club and what it actually means to me, and to be their leader and to be a head coach was a really, really, special time for me. It was difficult after 12 months of doing it that I had to step away. It was just unfortunate that I purely couldn't work 2 full-time jobs, which was the reasoning why I stepped away in the second season, because basically I was full-time with Southern Districts Football Association, and my role as a head coach at the Western Sydney Wanderers was a part-time role. And at that point it was, I've got a family, I've got kids, I've got a mortgage to pay. Where do I sort of sit? And as much as I loved that role and I loved being part of that professional environment, I had to make a decision, because if you're going to do something for me, you have to do it at 100% and make sure you do it right. And it was really, really difficult decision for me to step away from that role after being in that sort of hot seat for 12 months, because I did have a lot of aspirations in what we wanted to do and how we wanted to change things there, but it just wasn't meant to be. And I've still got a great relationship with the club, and, I still pop in at time to time and do things for them. But at that point in time in my life, it just wasn't meant to be for where we're at. Do I want to go back into that space one day? You never say never, right? Because as a footballer, as you know, you get the itch for everything. And at the moment, I'm content where I'm at with Southern Districts. But if the opportunity arises and it does become a full-time role, you never say never.
Right, we also see you on television a fair bit, working with the A-League Women's broadcasts. What's that transition been like, I suppose, into the media spotlight that way?
It was tough in the beginning when you got, the camera in your face, and it's a bit nerve-wracking if I'm honest about it. But now it just becomes, a sort of a natural thing. It's always a bit tough in the beginning when you haven't been on for a little while, but once you get yourself going again, it just becomes like second nature, because, again, everyone knows how passionate I am about the game, and I really talk from the heart, and I'm pretty honest in what my opinion is. And I think it's important that, we can talk open and freely about the game, because you want to be able to give that honest opinion. But to be able to be in that spotlight and be talking about the women's game, I think is just shows how far we've actually come.
And it does come across, your honesty and I love seeing you on the TV. Have you got any horror stories, I suppose, from it? Any stuff ups or not?
Oh, there's always stuff ups. You guys probably don't see him on the other side because we just keep rolling with it. But it's always quite difficult, and sometimes depending on weather or conditions, if we're out on the pitch and there's flies or things that are coming on your face or whatever it may be, there's so many different things that come in your way when you're doing those types of, days. But you just make it work and you make it flow on. But there's always, hurdles on those days.
Is it something that you just sort of learnt on the fly, I suppose, or do they prep you? Like, is there, I don't know, a bit of a school on what to do?
I'm sorry.
All right, all good. All right.
Jesus. I'm probably talking about flies. Go again.
Do you want a drink or you're right?
No, I'm right.
You sure?
Yeah, do you want to say it again?
I can't remember what I said now. It was
That's
off the cuff. Yeah, sorry. So is it a role where you sort of learn on the fly, like you just pick it up as you go, or do they sit you down and, give you a bit of a lesson on sort of how to do things, or how does that work?
It's basically you're learning as you go, and you start to pick up certain pointers, and you get a bit of mentoring by whoever the presenters are as well. I'll give you a couple of tips, but it's basically on the fly, and you're banking on your knowledge of the game and being able to be comfortable within, the way that you can project yourself on the TV and what you can say and what you can't say. But it's quite open and transparent in the way we do things. And again, I love that I can speak my mind about how I feel or what I think is going on in that space. And it's been actually really, really enjoyable. I'd never thought that I would go down that space, but after doing it a few times, I've really enjoyed it, especially the coverage of the Women's World Cups. I've done the last two with Optus Sport, and that's been really, really enjoyable.
Yeah. And I suppose what's next? Any short-term, long-term goals for Catherine Cannuli?
I think just still being involved in football, whether it's coaching or media. I love still being connected to the game in some way. And again, whether it's media, whether it's coaching, whilst you're connected, you're always learning and you're always improving yourself in your knowledge of the game and being connected. And I think whatever part it is, whether it's, again, on the pitch, off the pitch, as long as you're still connected to football, I think that's the most important thing. And it'll always be a massive part of my life, and I'm sure I'll be working in football in years to come, but in what space is still to sort of be continued.
And final question before we get on to our little finale. Do you have any advice for young kids, especially young girls who may be listening or watching along that do want to become a professional footballer?
I think you just got to work hard, get your head down and work hard. If there's probably something that I've really recognised over the last few years working in football especially, is that a lot of footballers want the success yesterday, and they need to trust the process of where they're going and what they're doing. And I think that's the most important part. When you look at your journey, don't look at your mate that you play with. Don't look at somebody else. Don't look at the successes of, for instance, Ellie Carpenter that debuted at 15 and was playing at World Cups, because not everybody is an Ellie Carpenter. You have your own story and your own journey, and you need to trust the process and, again, build those building blocks in your career. And if successes don't come overnight, keep working hard to set those goals and work on ways that you can actually achieve them.
There you go, some wise words. So before we wrap up, I need to know dinner guests. You got 3 guests, dead or alive. Who are you picking?
I'd probably pick Pele,
Yep.
Maradona,
Yep.
and Roberto Baggio.
Very good. And what do you reckon the topics of discussion there? Maybe a bit of football chat?
I think a little bit of football chat would be good, but I think listening to those legends and talking about football and what it was like back in those days, I love to hear those stories. I'm one that's big about stories and history around, what life was like back in, especially in those days, whether it was playing football or just life in general. I think there were 3 legends of our game, 2 that I would never get to speak to, but 1, who knows what could happen.
All right, we'll make it happen. I'll pull some strings through the corner flag. We'll get him out here. Very interesting. And can you tell me, you did a little bit of prep, 5, say the best players or players you've enjoyed, I suppose, playing or training with the most? So a little 5-a-side team. So I need a keeper, 4 field players.
Yeah, okay. This is a tough one, to be honest, because there's just so many of them, and you can't really pick, right? But I'd probably have to say in goals, you'd probably have to say Lydia Williams, Colette McCallum.
Yep.
Not many people would know Colette, but she's a really talented footballer, great little lefty. Probably Heather Garriock.
Yep.
Kylie Ledbrook. And the 5th one, how can you shy away from someone like a Sam Kerr? Let's throw her on there as well.
Okay, it's not a bad team, I suppose. And what about played against?
Played against? Ooh, probably Claire Polkinghorne.
Yep.
Maybe Tamiki Yallop, tough competitor as well.
Yeah.
Ellie Brush always used to have massive arguments on the pitch with her.
Yep.
They're all defenders.
Yeah, I could tell.
You could tell
yeah.
that's who I'd always go up against. Played against probably Kate McShay was a tough competitor too on the pitch. And probably the other one was Anissa Ten Derby. I never forget one of my first National League games. I was a youngster on the pitch and I'd taken the mickey out of her at some point and she never let me regret it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So
You learn quickly.
learnt it really, really quickly. That doesn't happen these days, unfortunately.
No,
but
I reckon with like my generation has dropped the ball there because I remember going into first grade or whatever,
Yeah.
and you knew you were getting whacked straight away, and how you reacted decided the rest of your time at that club or at that session or whatever. Where it's not
absolutely.
quite like that anymore. So maybe you can bring that back. Let's put that into the Southern District's
We'll
plan.
put it in. We'll put it in there.
Pencil it in. That's it, Cath. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm sure everyone at home really enjoy hearing your story. Is there anything that you want to add before we wrap up?
No, it's great to see you doing this around football, and I think it's fantastic that we get to talk about the beautiful game and share our passion together.
Oh, thank you very much. So that's it from Catherine Cannuli. Thank you so much again for coming on, and I hope you enjoy this when it comes out.
Thank you.
So. There you have it, football fans. The away leg with Catherine Cannuli is done. If you haven't already, please make sure you go back and check out the home leg and the warm-up as well with Catherine Cannuli. And I really do hope you enjoyed that chat with her. As you can tell, she is an amazing person and a great football personality and a real pioneer in the women's football space. Please, obviously, make sure you're liking, following, subscribing on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, doing all those things. It really does help, and keep passing the cast. Keep your eyes peeled because we'll be announcing and dropping our second guest shortly for season 2. And again, thank you so much for choosing to score some goals with us here. And remember, celebrate with the corner flag.